Introduce our guests just a little bit later, but we come from a home where everything starts and ends around our faith. So in honor of that, we thought that we would ask Father Paul Bahrain if he could open this ceremony in prayer for us, please. Thank you very much. Father Paul.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
He went down with them and stood on a level place. A large crowd of his disciples was there, and a great number of people from all over Judea, from Jerusalem, and from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. Those troubled by evil spirits were cured, and the people all tried to touch him because power was coming from him and healing them all. Looking at his disciples, he said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you, and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for great is your reward in heaven, for that is how their fathers treated the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your reward. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all people speak well of you, for that is how their fathers treated the false prophets." This is the word of the Lord. I'm not going to preach a 50-minute sermon, but I do, when I stand here, want to say just a few things. The first is from a poem by John Donne. "Death, be not proud. For those whom thou think'st thou overthrow, die not, dear death. Neither can you kill me." And so we gather here today to celebrate, actually, those who were called to pay the ultimate price. And I want to say, from my knowledge of faith and from Fort, the ultimate price for their neighbors. And we really are here to celebrate that they have not died in vain. But we also remind ourselves that for many people in this country, a context has not changed yet. In a country where there should be no poor, in a country where all are created in the image of God, we have much to do if we are paying proper respect to the memory of Fort today. To his family and those who've loved him deeply, those of you who have tasted the pain of bereavement will know that it actually doesn't disappear in 4 years, more or less, but that there are sometimes when the sting is as profound as the very day you encountered it. And we pray that you will be energized somehow by your grief to reverse the tide of greed and corruption and violence. Because those ultimately were what murdered Fort. And that all of us gathered here will become activists for a new dispensation. Amen. Let us pray. O God, we celebrate the gift that you gave us in Fort. Young as he was, a man of great vision, a promise of what this nation holds in its hands. Walk with those who still feel his passing deeply. Strengthen them in their resolve that his death should not be anything that would silence him. We pray for our nation at a new crossroads. And we ask that you would raise up leaders who are convicted by the truth, who struggle for justice and dignity for all, not just in the courts, but on the streets, not just in the houses of learning, but in our homes. As we gather this morning, we confess that we are part of a people that disrespects those who have nothing. The poor have become a nuisance to us. To you, they are sacred. We're ashamed of the scourge of gender-based violence. The number of young people and women whose lives have tasted death and who are forced to carry on living despite their humiliation. We pray for your healing. And we pray for a determination to be part of a new creation, to use our imagination and our creative gifts to sing a new song, a song which gives freedom to all. The beggar on the street corner, the child-headed household, the broken by rejection. Pour your Spirit upon us afresh, so that we may see in one another your presence. For we ask these things in your name and for your sake. Amen. Amen.
All right, thank you very much to Father Paul for that very strong and encouraging message as we get underway this morning. Now, I had promised just before Father Paul came on that I would introduce to you my guests that are with us today. Now, to my left is Professor Janet Cherry. Professor is political and social activist who has been in this sphere for years She was part of UDF and worked in Cradock in the mid-80s, early 90s, and knew my father and Matthew Goniwe. And Prof, we are delighted that you could join us this morning, and we look forward to having some really good discussions with you around the issue of social justice, restorative and retributive justice as well. So, welcome. All right. And then I'm going to go to my extreme left, Prof. Saths Cooper. Prof. Cooper is a person who's also has a very strong history linked to the Black consciousness movement of the 1970s. Politically very active in the 1980s. Is now a professor of psychology and sits on various bodies and institutions that deal with psychology and all of those in the country, and is also overseeing my sister's PhD studies. So, Prof, thank you very much for joining us. We welcome to Cradock. We look forward to having this discussion. And then in the middle is the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, currently of the Republic of South Africa, Minister Ronald. Minister, thank you very much for joining us. All right, so we're going to start off by asking Prof. Cherry if she could give us, for about 10 minutes, Prof, some opening remarks around Cradock, the role that this town played in the Eastern Cape in the 1980s, and just why you believe that Fort and Matthew and Sparro and Sicelo had to be murdered. Prof. Janet Cherry. No. You can just where you are. The microphone is on.
Good morning, everybody. Greetings, Minister, and thank you very much, Lukhanyo. Thank you, Ronald. Thank you, Abigail. Thank you, the other children of Mhlauli at Fort Calata, and thank you, Mama Mhlauli and Mama Mkonto as well. So I was saying that I feel very honored to be invited to be part of this inaugural event, this memorial lecture for the Fort Calata Foundation. And I feel quite emotional and quite moved to be here because, of course, when I come to Cradock, and especially in this Garden of Remembrance, which is very beautifully designed, I find it very moving. It takes me back to 1985, and I start reflecting on what the context was, and it seems like a very long time ago. And I wanted to reflect very briefly on two things in my opening remarks. The one is that I was asked to talk about the pursuit of social and restorative justice here, and I actually worked for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as part of the research team. I attended every single human rights violations hearing in Cradock and elsewhere in the Eastern Cape, and the amnesty applications hearings that were held for those who murdered the Cradock Four. And I've met personally with two of the assassins, with the murderers who applied for amnesty, and they have both since passed away. So, I feel very closely connected to the situation. And I will leave it for the discussion after the Minister has given his input. But my overall feeling about this is that we do know the truth, and that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission did succeed in that respect. If we had not had that particular model of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the people who murdered the Cradock Four would not have come forward, because it was a conditional amnesty that they applied for. And they spoke about what they had done and took responsibility for what they had done. Those individuals who applied for amnesty. Now, the people who gave the orders is another matter. But the people who applied for amnesty, I believe, actually did tell the truth about what they did, and that we know substantially what happened. And we do know who gave the orders as well. So I think there was some level of success, if you can call it success, in something so painful, that they did actually come and speak about what they had done. When it comes to justice, however, I think it's clear to all of us that there has been no substantive justice in this and in many other cases. Now, in this case, they were denied amnesty, so they could have been prosecuted subsequent to that. However, now it's 35 years later, and 36 years later, and most of the people who applied for amnesty and were denied amnesty have died. They are not here to be prosecuted. So I feel like we can't understand that as a failure of the Truth and Reconciliation process. I think it may be considered a failure of subsequent state administrations, like the NPA, which did not take action when it could have taken action. And I don't know the reasons why it did not take action. And I'm not entirely sure what action was appropriate. I'm not entirely sure that prosecution of those individuals would have been the correct course of action. But I think I'm going to leave that for the discussion. And I mean, it is a controversial issue, and I'm putting it out on the table at the beginning of this session, which is how I understood it. But I want to just reflect very briefly on the reasons why Fort Calata, Matthew Goniwe, Sicelo, Mhlauli, and Sparro Mkonto were killed, were assassinated. And for me, that reason is clear, because I was here and I understood what they were trying to achieve here and what they did achieve. And what they achieved was something extraordinary, something really extraordinary in South Africa. So let me just explain what I understood. And I think Matthew, who was, for me, was a leader. Fort was a leader. Fort was, I think, 5, 6 years older than me. And I was very young at the time. I was I just finished university and come to start working as an activist in the Eastern Cape. So they were the leadership of the organizations here, which were affiliated to the United Democratic Front. And what was extraordinary was how they pioneered what I called a counter-hegemonic strategy. They built a counter-power to the apartheid regime. And they built a counter-power in a sense which I call hegemonic, not in the sense of force, but in the sense of mobilizing people around their own interests, for their own conviction, to take the struggle forward. And in effect, they liberated Lingelihle. I can't say that they liberated the whole of Cradock, but they actually liberated Lingelihle through Credoya, and the structures of popular power that were implemented here. Now this is well known now, it's documented, and it's written in the history books, and it's written in the exhibition which has just been opened, which is actually a very beautiful exhibition. One of the most extraordinary things in that exhibition, if you have time to read it, is a set of notes that Matthew Goniwe made in the period 1984, so, where he describes how they are organizing at a grassroots level and what the intention is, how to link the needs and demands of people living in Lingelihle Township to the national demands of the liberation movement. And what is important is the way in which Matthew and Fort organized, the way in which they set up organizations which really empowered people. So I think we should really try and learn from them. I wanted to just reflect very briefly on what I experienced here, which was I met Fort and Matthew in 1984, and you mentioned in your book, Lukhanyo, that in January 1985, one of the first things they did once the black local authorities had resigned and effectively Cradock controlled Lengelihle, was to set up an adult literacy project. And I was one of the people who came from Port Elizabeth to assist in that process of setting up the adult literacy project. And that project was premised on a polyfrarian understanding of education, which involved people at every level of society, everybody from the elderly people. And if you remember that Brecht poem where it says, learn man in the madhouse, learn woman in the prison, learn 60-year-old, it is never too late, you must take over the leadership. That was the philosophy that guided this kind of project that Fort and Matthew set up. And what we did is we worked with the youth under Cradock, which Fort was leading at the time. He organized those youth to be trained as adult literacy workers. And they could then go and work with other people in the community and use this method of critical interrogation of your context, making sense of your context, understanding what oppression meant, what was wrong in that context, and what kind of action could be taken to change that situation. So this was true empowerment. It was critical. It didn't involve any rhetoric. It didn't involve any arrogance. It involved a real building of power at grassroots level. It was a really extraordinary experience. And I've got to say, it had a lot of joy and a lot of fun involved. And we used drama, we used all kinds of methods to get people involved in that training. Some months later, and my memory of these times is quite disturbed by the violence and the deaths that happened. But some months later, I returned with another group of activists from Grahamstown, including Ronald, who was the UDF treasurer, who was a close friend of mine, and we did another course for members of Cradock, COSAS, in organizational skills and quite practical things like bookkeeping, keeping a transparent set of books. Well, not that there was much money to be transparent about, but the principles of honest accounting for funding, of media work, of organizational keeping proper minutes, these sort of very practical things. So these kinds of things were, and I do wonder here if there is anybody in Cradock now who would be my age who would remember, who was part of those kind of training courses. So the memories that people have of that time tend to be of the trauma and the violence that occurred. But I just want to make one last point about how this building of popular power worked. The principle that Fort and Matthew worked from was one of inclusive non-racialism, non-sexism, non-hierarchical behavior. The way in which they worked. I've got to tell you, Lukhanyo, I was quite intimidated by Fort. He was a bit older than me, and he was quite a strong, outspoken, tough guy, I would say, in a way. But, he never treated me or anybody as anything other than an equal. Yeah. And the way in which those organizations functioned was democratic and inclusive and tolerant. One sign of this was when the black local authorities councillors resigned in January 1985. And I remember so distinctly, I wasn't present at the event, but I was told how the young activists, the young comrades, were instructed to go to the houses of the councillors and take down the wire mesh and the barbed wire that had been put in front of their windows and so on, because they were under threat.
Yeah.
And it was a demonstration to them that they were now included in that community. They were part of the community, and they were welcomed back in. And that was the sign of the shift of power. You know, that was when it was apparent to all of us that Cradock had actually taken power in Lingelihle. And really, in that context, you can understand why they had to die, why they were targeted. And just to note, I mean, this has also been quoted elsewhere. Gladwell Makaula, who I remember well, he called on other townships to follow this example and create liberated zones. And Oliver Tambo then stated in his January the 8th statement that the democratic movement has emerged as the alternative power, and that all oppressed must emulate this example. And then Joffel van der Westhuizen, who, as you know, was involved in giving the signal to have them eliminated, he said that the Eastern Province was the hotbed of the revolutionary onslaught against the state, and that Cradock was the first to implement alternative structures of government. This was why the order was given for them to be permanently removed from society. So thank you, that's my reflection.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think they're giving you a round of applause. Thank you very much, ma'am, for giving us a little bit of the insight and of what it was like to be and work in Cradock during those days, and for just sharing some of your memories of my dad. It really means a lot. Prof. Cooper, I think I'll come to you now. Prof. Cherry spoke of how her memory is somehow disturbed, particularly by the violence of that time. And I'd like to give you, obviously, the floor for 10 minutes, Prof, to give your opening remarks, which I do hope will speak to the issue of, touch on the issue of violence and how the people in Cradock would have been affected by the level of violence that was inflicted on leaders of their communities. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Ours is a violent country, and that violence predates our democracy. We have emerged from the most violent, bigoted, and oppressive system since Nazi Germany. And all around us, we see behaviors that are learned behaviors from those who have done us wrong, who have harmed us. Tradition dictates that we honor the dead, we commemorate those who have left us, especially those who have been part of us and who have contributed unstintingly to a life of service and selfless sacrifice. Indeed, I did not know Matthew Goniwe personally, but I did interact and knew Sicelo, Mhlauli, and Fort. And these were young men. Fort was, when he was murdered, was not even 30 years old. And when any of our people dies, we give them the benefit of a send-off, because in life, which has been heavy, the refrain of the song is Unzima Lomtwalo. So when persons die, we give them the best, and all of you know that. But when a system intended to replace the horrors of the past, actively seeks to present blockages in the quest for justice, then we need to ask questions around why. What made F.W. de Klerk declare a few months back that there was a pact, and that part of that pact was to forgive and forget. Now, you can forgive, as the TRC process initiated, but it's unnatural to forget. Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel talked of the divine retribution of memory. And so we remember not for revenge, not for vengeance, but we remember so that we can come into some degree of peace amongst ourselves and begin to understand. Now, when children were born into orphanage because of that system, when wives were left without answers and are still searching for answers, there's an impact on the larger community. And the clear lesson of the struggle in this instance is, if those leaders amongst us were left in the lurch, what about me? What about us? Will they hear us? Will they do anything? And so you can see the cauldron of violence that gave birth to this democracy has been perpetuated in so many forms. And you can trace the militarization, the involvement by P.W. Botha in Angola and other places, and in 1975, sealed caskets being returned of the boys on the border. And then began something called femicide. We lent to the dictionary of psychopathology femicide. It was an exclusive phenomenon of the militarists. But then, fairly quickly, black persons who were in the security services began to do the same thing. So now it's commonplace that we have policemen and women shooting their partners, their kids, and themselves. Self-murd. So you want to commit murder, you want to commit suicide, but you take those around you away from you. I can go on with such examples where infant rape, how does a grown man be in such a situation as to feel he wants to rape a 2-year-old? Now, we are a wounded country, deeply wounded by what was visited on us in the past. And when we have no remission of that during the democracy that we believed will deliver us from all that evil, but indeed those in power seem to want to block, if not perpetuate, if not deny or hide the facts around that. It adds to the confusion. So when you see people taking the law into their own hands, it's because those responsible have not been brought to book, even for blatant criminal acts that we know. We heard the former director of national prosecutions, Vusi Pikole, in his affidavit that Lukhanyo, and I must commend Lukhanyo and your siblings and the other families for staying the course. Young as you were, little kids, your sister wasn't even born when that happened, but you stayed the course to find out what happened and to bring to book the perpetrators. And I must commend current Minister Lamula, for it is only under his remit that we're beginning to see that quest for justice being requited in some way. So I can go on about the effects of the past in the present and how it's been convoluted in our thinking. I can go on about the fact that the Nazi Holocaust and all the other stuff that was done then gave rise to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was signed into a dictate of international law in December 1948, and that President Mandela signed our constitution on that same date in 1996. But those charged with upholding the constitution have done everything to violate the very precepts. So ordinary people then, when their leaders have been impacted, have been destroyed, have been killed, and there's gaps in those communities, there's deep aches, there's deep anger, there's resentment because others get justice, indeed benefit from the system when we are excluded. So if we can return to a degree of compassion, of caring, of actually closing the book, not forgetting, closing the book, because as Nelson Mandela said, never, never, never again. We should not repeat those mistakes in our present and in the future, that our kids and young people here who don't deserve the mistakes of adults behaving badly being visited on them.
All right.
How we treat the worst off amongst us underpins our own claim to being part of the human family. And I trust that we will care for our brothers, our sisters, and find that justice and dignity that all of us deserve. Thank you.
Prof, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And thanks also for keeping it within 10 minutes. And now I'd obviously like to turn to you, Minister, for your opening remarks. Minister, my mother is here. The lady, we're now wearing a blue dress. Mrs. Mhlauli, Minister, is sitting right here in front with one of the red umbrellas and the sunglasses and the big afro. That's her with the beautiful smile. I saw someone from the Mkonto family here also, Minister. And I think I'd like you to speak specifically to my mother. I'd like you to speak specifically to Mrs. Mhlauli and to the representatives of the Mkonto family. Unfortunately, the Goniwe family could not be here despite our invite to them. And explain to them, Minister, why it is that 27 years into a democracy of that's led by an organization for which my family has got a history that stretches back to 1930, whereas my family had served the African National Congress. My family bled, my family died for the African National Congress, yet we are sitting here today in a country that's governed by the African National Congress and their husbands, our fathers, we're still waiting for justice, despite the brutal manner in which they were killed. So, Minister, I would like to give you the floor and you can address them.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible.
Not yet? Okay, that should be fine now.
Am I fine?
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I fine now? Oh, okay. Thank you. And not sure. It's still morning.
Yeah, it is by
Somewhere.
a few minutes, but it's still morning.
Yeah. No. Good morning, everyone, and all the families, including the panelists I'm with here. Firstly, is that as indeed as a country, we have just emerged from the local government elections, and it's 25 years of the celebration of the constitution in the country. And I do think that the low voter turnout is an expression by the people of this country and their frustration with regards to, in particular, service delivery. And I suspect it's the same question that Lukhanyo, you are asking me about the years of non-prosecution or no justice for the families. It is also the same question I asked myself when I came into the department, that why should it, in fact, I also asked you informally as we're coming here, that why should it be me who come and answer to this issue now? And I think the Rodrigo's judgment, to a certain extent, gave me light why it should be me, because I was also struggling to understand when the NGOs and the civic organizations were perpetually knocking on my door on this issue. And I must state why I was a bit asking myself this question is because at the height of the 6th administration coming into office, there was a bigger issue of state capture that was on our table, which we do not have resources to deal with in terms of the Commission of Inquiry. You will have seen us raising the issues, and also the independent investigative directorate in terms of the resources that we needed to put there. So I was asking myself that when we came in, I believe that we had the necessary skill, resources to have done this that was not done in this past 25 years. But upon reading the affidavits and the judgment on Rodrigo's, it became clear to me that there could have been issues beyond my control why these things did not happen. And I think the families do deserve reality for the truth to come out. And it is for that reason that we have agreed with the judgment that we need to appoint a judge who must conclude the investigation to hold everyone accountable on why this thing, justice, no prosecution, or anyone who might have affected the work that was supposed to have been done by what should be an independent institution, the National Prosecuting Authority. And we believe that that will enable us to find everyone who might have obstructed justice to be accountable for why it did not happen, on the basis of the affidavit that was presented to the court by the former National Director of Public Prosecution. So for us, that is the first step that needs to happen, that whoever made it not to happen must be held accountable. And we do not also stop there. Despite the challenges of resources, we have also engaged with the NPA to understand why it did not happen. And the NPA said, while the processes of the judge needs to be concluded and on the basis of the affidavit, the reason why it is not happening now is because they don't have the skills that are necessary, required, nor the human resource that will enable this work to be done. And they requested us to give them support to appoint that necessary human resource, which we did. They have now appointed 23 prosecutors in the specialized TRC space. And we have said through the policy that this process must be done within a period of 3 years because it has now taken too long. And I know that between the discussion with the Judge President and the Director of Public Prosecution in Gauteng, there's already an agreement that the NPA needs to come up with a decision with regards to the Cradock Four matter, in particular, within before the end of this year, December, which I hope the NPA must be able to, with the available information and evidence in front of them, to make a decision in that regard. And we did not also end there. We also said for this capability to make it practical, even the Hawks, as we speak now, they have appointed 34 investigators, which is also exclusively for the TRC matters. And with a clear mandate that these investigations must lead to a closure on all the TRC investigations, and also the NPA must come up with a clear policy in terms of dealing with them across the country. And this must be done within a period of 3 years. So this is what we found on the table, and these are the actions that we have taken so that there must be justice for the families. And it is unfortunate that it has to happen after 26 years or 25 years, but it has to happen and it must be done so that there could be closure not only for the families, but I hope for the community of Cradock. I can hear from the Prof the impact they've made here, and for the whole country in terms of organizing, in terms of the role of all South Africans that they've played to liberate this country, but also to take it forward. And I don't only look at it from a prosecutorial issue. I look at it also from a service delivery perspective. As a democratic country, 25 years of celebration of the Constitution must mean something to the people of the country. They must feel and touch what we are doing as a government. And I do believe that the Constitution expects us to do what it is provided in the Constitution. It should not just be something that we talk about. People must see it in terms of the actions, practically and tangible. And that is the reason, Lukhanyo, I don't want to speak long, because I believe that what should speak is the work that should be done.
All right, Minister, thank you. Minister, thank you very much for those opening remarks and for some of the tangibles that you've put in place. I think as we were about to get into the discussion around what should happen and the quest for justice, I'd like to kick it off by asking you whether you think that this process of appointing a judge to investigate the lack of prosecutions within the NPA and I think that is a directive of one of the courts. I'm not sure if that's the SCA or not, but whether
Yeah,
on
the SCA.
it is the SCA, whether SCA is the Supreme Court of Appeal. Whether or not you think that that process should be a public process, or should it be kept behind closed doors so that we as the public who have been denied justice, should we not be able to participate in that public process? Or do you think that that investigation and that the judge, or inquiry, if I can put it like that, that it should be closed? Do you think it should be an open or closed process, just so that we can understand where you are on that matter?
Yeah, obviously, firstly, I will not really want to, in this kind of a public platform, discuss the terms of reference of the upcoming judge. We will also want to have a discussion with the judge to say, what do you think will work in this environment, and whether we should make it public, or you think you will be able to find justice or to do the inquiry only if it is closed. And I think only then we will be able to state our view. But I think now, for me, it will be a policy pronouncement if I do it now in this platform. But I do have a view, which I will prefer to make it known when we provide the terms of reference of the judge.
All right, no, that's fine. Prof Cherry, the minister says for now he prefers obviously to kind of have a discussion with the judge first, see whether or not the process, the inquiry as to why the NPA has failed to prosecute TRC related matter.
But maybe to come there, Lukhanyo, is that my view does not stop the families from stating whether they want it to be public or not.
No, sure, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, we want it to be open. I don't think that there's any doubt. But I was going to ask Prof. Cherry if she could opine on the matter. Do you think it should be an open process, or is it okay for the judge to do what it is that he has to, and then give us as a nation a report once he's actually concluded the matter?
So, Lukhanyo, I'm not sure what form this process takes, actually, but the principle should be one of accountability, and accountability must mean some level of transparency and public accountability. I mean, that would be the purpose of it. So I don't know at what point it becomes public. I can't work out, I mean, would it take the form of hearings? How does that kind of investigation happen? So for me, as long as it is accountable, and the people who want to know have access to that information and to that testimony, or whatever is that investigation, then I think it will meet the need.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prof, Prof. Cooper, I saw you shaking your head.
It's a difficult one, because if it means the kind of expenditure we've seen in Zondo, then I would say, no, we can't afford that. We'd rather have somebody go in there, deal with the issues, get testimony, interrogate particular officials, and expedite the matter. Because otherwise there can be the tendency of having the show and tell spectacle that, I don't know what the cost is now, but it's probably about 2 billion rand. We don't need...
It's one.
1 billion.
So, in a country with so many competing needs, we need somebody competent, capable, who has the necessary gravitas for her or him to call the witnesses, call the different people, hold them to account, because I'm sure there is a paper and other trail. And that should not preclude any aggrieved family in particular from making representations. And there can be a call, I think there ought to be a call for all ye who have knowledge of what happened to prevent this, come forward and submit, rather than get restricted to the chat groups and make accusations, counter accusations, which go nowhere, add to the ambience of uncertainty and insecurity. We need finality. And the families, I think, will be better served if it's swifter, not expedient, but swifter, but with the levels of transparency that can be permitted.
Sure. All right. Thanks very much. Minister, I'm not sure if I was able to help you there in terms of whether or not it should be a public process, whether or not it should be a closed process. I was kind of hoping that the professors would be able to nudge us in a, but it ultimately, I mean, you are going to have that conversation with the judge. But again, I'm hoping that this process would have sparked some ideas with you. Minister, the other thing that you've said was you've mentioned the appointment of both prosecutors as well as investigators. I think 23 prosecutors, 34 investigators, and given a deadline of about 3 years. What assurances, Minister, can you give us that those people that have been appointed will do as they are supposed to do to help us finalize some of these matters that have been long outstanding? But in also asking that question is, can you give us an assurance that there will be some type of vetting, that I know that this is not something that you deal with, but I'm sure that you have people that respond to you, or that report to you at least, that would ensure that some of these cases are not investigated and are not prosecuted by the very same people who helped perpetrate the crimes in the first place.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, obviously from our side is that there must be accountability from the NPA to society on the prosecutorial mandate. So that is how they must be held accountable in terms of them delivering for the work that they are supposed to do. And that they also account to the public through Parliament and also through this stakeholder engagement with the victims and the various civil society platforms. I think that is how we should hold them accountable on this work. We have said to them, and the President has also said to them, he has also said it in the public platforms, that they must prosecute without fear or favor, and the Hawks must investigate without any fear or favor. So that is a political will that is there for them to do the job. With regards to the vetting, they do have their NPA policies, and the Hawks have their own policies of vetting, which I hope will ensure that the people who are fit for purpose are appointed for the job, and who will not be, as you have said, the ones that might have perpetrated. But there's one reality that as a country we have in this democracy, is that when you are looking for expertise and experience of certain types of prosecutions and investigations, you will end up finding people that might be coming from the old guard in this kind of an institution. But I think the NPA are alive to the reality that you need people that will also be patriotic to take the country forward.
Prof. Cherry, the Minister touches on the issue of political will, and there seems clearly at the moment that it is an issue that is there, and hence we've seen, such appointments. 23 prosecutors, 34 investigators, given a timeline to say this is what happens to this is what happened to TRC cases. Shall we put the last 25 years, 26, 27 years down to there being a lack of political will that led us to be at this point that we're at?
So the short answer is yes, but the reason behind that has to be interrogated. So I think there has been some genuine resource constraint on the state. And if you think about the levels of crime and corruption and so on, I mean, there really is a serious resource constraint. I'm not entirely convinced about the skills argument, because if you think over the last 25 years, we've surely got a new batch of investigators and prosecutors who aren't the old guard in the sense that they were in the legal system in the apartheid regime. In terms of political will at a more political level, there clearly has to be some. There are two levels of that as well. The one level is the political dynamics and divisions within the ruling party, which has had an influence on this situation. There's no doubt about it. And the other is going back even further, is the allegations that there was some kind of deal which involved a threat to current leadership of the ANC, that they would then face prosecution. I don't have any evidence to that, and I don't know what the truth is behind that, but I presume that would be.
Let's ask the minister. Minister, do you know of a deal that was struck? I think Prof. Cooper mentioned it earlier on in his presentation, and I remember shortly after the NDPP had issued a statement earlier this year. She issued it on the 27th of June. That was the day that my dad and the Cradock Four, that was the day when they went missing. So it was quite poignant for us on the day for the NPA to issue that statement to say, time is against us, we've made these appointments, this is what it is that we are doing. A couple of days later, F.W. de Klerk then responded to that statement by the NDPP. And in that statement, kind of hidden away in that statement, de Klerk said that there was a deal that was struck between members of the ANC as well as members of the former apartheid state. It may have been an informal deal that there be no prosecution of TRC cases. So, Minister, in Cradock today, I'm going to ask you, was there a deal?
Maybe I'm too young to know.
He's young.
I don't know. But I have not found it.
You haven't found it?
Yeah, I saw the statement, but...
What did you make of the statement? Was there at any point where you sat and thought about it and just how dangerous that statement is? Because de Klerk would obviously not have said that there was a deal if he didn't know about it. And if there was a deal, how dangerous it is for us. Because whatever deal that was made was not sanctioned by Mhlauli. I doubt that she would have said, oh, it's fine, take the deal, don't prosecute my husband's murderers. I doubt that she even knows anything about a deal. I know that my family, we don't know anything about the deal. We weren't part to. So whatever deal that was made does not carry our mandate. So when de Klerk issued that statement, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, I saw it, but for me, my view was that it's immaterial because the NPA Act is clear that they must prosecute without fear or favor. And from our side, we have also said it, that They must do their job. The evidence in front of them must be what guides them. Even if myself say they must not do it, the act is clear, and hence we have this process now to appoint a judge, because whoever might have obstructed their job must be held accountable.
What if?
So,
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you short, Minister. But what if some of those people that obstructed the course of justice are some of your cabinet members and colleagues?
yeah, obviously it will come through this process of the judge, and it will have to be held accountable. So, for me, the law is clear what must be done. In terms of the act of the NPA, they need to follow their conscience and their oath of office as prosecutors and also the investigators. That's what they need to do. Even ourselves can shout that they must not prosecute. The law is clear. And if I'm shouting it and I'm instructing them, I must also follow the same fate as the Rodriguez matter.
All right. Prof. Cooper, I see you're sitting, you're nodding your head in agreement, I think, I hope.
Yes, I think, the minister is quite clear that it needs to fall where it falls, and those persons who are responsible must take accountability for their actions. It's a pity that it took 27 years for this to happen, but I think it's a small sign of how we can change our lot if we have the commitment and principled leadership that a few, I've already said the minister is one of those persons who stands for that kind of standing by the letter of our constitution. So I think that in the choices of whoever's there, they are going to be acutely aware that not only the Mhlaulis and the Mkontos and the Calatas and the Goniwes and the various other families who have had murder which has gone hidden coming into the picture, but it will help this country on its path to healing and finding one another. I mean, Reverend Paul Verlaine has in his opening scriptures talked of us finding ourselves, which we are far away from, and even further now with the results of the last election, which the minister has alluded to. So something else needs to happen, and I think this brighter, smarter crop of leadership is the one that we can begin to entrust with taking us forward. Because anything else means that we're going to be stuck with the same problems of the past. So I think we need to, the minister has spoken, he has given his commitment previous to this, putting in place certain processes, and 3 years, so we can hold, and obviously 3 years is the outside limit, and let's hear what happens. Seriatim, I think some of these things need to happen. So some of the ongoing cases, I think, will bear some fruit earlier, because people are dying, and then there's this weird perversion of justice when the state attorney appoints senior counsel and junior counsel to defend people accused of murdering our people, claiming that it was done in the name of the state at that point, which thing is, in my view, also debatable, because they didn't come clean. They didn't claim that they were murderers. De Klerk, till this dying day, carries on saying nothing like this happened. He was totally unaware. So who was responsible then for creating that mayhem? And I think a time has to come where state resources are not used against us in the quest for justice as well.
All right, thank you very much for that, Prof. Okay, I just also want to ensure that the members who are in our audience, that you guys are free to ask questions at any time. That this is not just about the panel that's sitting here, but that you are members of the public and that you have clearly shown that you are as interested in these issues as we all are. So if you have a question to ask, please raise your hand. We'll get a microphone to you and you can engage. I already see a question from this gentleman up front. Is there any chance that we can get a microphone to him? If not, my brother, I'm happy for you to ask the question, and then I will just relay that. Oh, the wind is picking up, so we must wrap. Go ahead, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Sorry, well, let me not say sorry. My English is not too good, but as I was sitting here, I had 2 billion from the prof, and I had the minister saying 1 billion, and in my head I was thinking 3 billion. And then I understand that I'm going somewhere. I mean, this is almost close to 3 decades. 3 billion, 3 decades. And I've had also lots of numbers coming here. There's 32, and then there's 20-something prosecutors and so on. And I had 3 years. And I was thinking, with the money involved and that there's already been close to 3 decades, and do we really need 3 years? Is it possible at all for that time to be maybe half the time instead of 3 years for this to happen? Because if we say within 3 years, then it's likely to be 3 years. And I do understand some evidence is already there, but do we really need 3 years? I had Prof also saying something about SWIFT, and I was really thinking, could it really happen much quicker than 3 years? Thank you very much.
All right. Minister, I think that question was directed at you.
Okay, no, thanks. I think the amount the Prof was mentioning was not for this matter. It's related to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. And I can confirm that it's almost R1 billion as we are sitting here now. With regards to the 3 years period, I do think it's a reasonable kind of a time frame that we have given to the NPA to deal with these prosecutions, in that there are a lot of factors that come into play when they finally make a decision whether to prosecute or not to prosecute, and also when the matter goes through the court processes. So I do think 3 years is still a reasonable period. I understand that it might have been, it's a long time, 27 years later. But also, you also still want to safeguard the process, not to unduly put the prosecutors under pressure. They will also take a half-cooked matter to court. So, and when it does not work, they will just say, but you gave us 6 months, and if you have just added 1 month, we could have done a proper job. Sure. So you don't also want that kind of a thing. You need to give them the leeway to assess the information in front of them. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We are, obviously the wind is starting to pick up. Yeah, the wind is starting to pick up, so, and we must try and protect the process. We do have just a little bit over 30 minutes to go before we can wrap this process, or wrap the lecture at least for 2021. But let me take another question from the floor. Mr. Jacobs?
Thank you, Lukhanyo. Good afternoon to you and to the minister and the panelists. Minister, what happened to the people of South Africa is painful and deeply painful. It refuses to go away. And today we're dealing with a prominent instance of that pain. Minister, what I want to ask you is, in the context of the undeniable fact that black people generally in South Africa have been fed sweet candy by those that they trusted to lead them out of the dehumanization that they have suffered for decades. Is a decision like this a personal initiative by a conscientious, young and smart leader, to quote the Prof? Or is this a reorientation of the principle between the ANC as leader of society? Can we expect this to set the tone for how we're dealing with the South African condition, even if it's after 27 years of sucking on a sweet candy, as black people generally in the country? Thank you.
All right, Minister, I'm not sure if you heard most of that question, or the bulk of it at least. I'm sorry that the wind is giving us some audio problems, but this is, I suppose, one of the dangers of hosting an event outside. But you may respond to it, sir.
Yeah, I can say that it's with renewal that the President of the Republic is leading, because obviously, although the powers in terms of the Act have been delegated to me by the President, but he's also aware of these matters. I have briefed him, and he has said we need to allow the institutions that are empowered to exercise the law in terms of the NPA Act, and that when necessary we must engage with the National Treasury and everyone to help them with the necessary resources, which included the resources for the Hawks and the NPA to be able to appoint these people. So it is not some clever initiative of myself. It is within the context of renewal that the President is leading, and I believe he wants to reconnect with the people of this country. What he needs is us giving him the necessary support to lead the program of renewal.
Right. Prof. Cherry, is it enough? What what this process that has started? Should we give it more time? Is it enough?
So I don't know if it's enough time, but I don't think time is the issue. I think really, on a note of caution, even if you give it more time, I'm really worried about whether there is actually the basis for successful prosecutions. So I think we have to be quite careful in terms of managing expectations. I mean, I'm thinking about this case and I'm not sure who could be prosecuted. I mean, you know, Van Rensburg, Van der Westhuizen, and the people who gave the orders are not here to be prosecuted.
No, Joffel van der Westhuizen is alive.
Is he?
We found him alive and well in Gansbaai. He was not very cooperative, I think, when we spoke to him. F.W. de Klerk, I mean, before we went to court, we presented, in our court documents, we presented evidence of F.W. as minister. Whoa.
No, this is
I
not.
think it's gonna.
Okay, all right, okay, all right. I think just because of the wind is wreaking havoc with us.
This thing is gonna. I think we need to.
Yeah, no, I think because this process is wreaking havoc with us, I think we are going to have to stop it at this moment. Unfortunately, it's no longer safe for us to continue. So everybody, I am really sorry that we have to end in this fashion, but please allow me to say thank you very much. It is quite unsafe, Minister. If we could move out in Prof.